The message came through at 2 in the morning, and Jake Martinez knew immediately that something was wrong. Emergency repair calls to the Zytharan Imperial Palace didn't happen. The aliens had their own engineers, their own systems, their own pride. They didn't ask humans for help. But the text on his communicator was clear. Report to the palace immediately. No delays, no questions. He threw on his work clothes and grabbed his toolkit, his hands already running through mental checklists. 20 minutes later, he stood at the palace gates while 4 royal guards scanned him with weapons that hummed with enough charge to vaporize him instantly. They escorted him through halls of polished crystal and metal that seemed to breathe with bioluminescent light. No one spoke. The silence felt like a weight pressing down on his chest. When they reached the royal chambers, the captain of the guard stopped him with one clawed hand. "The queen is inside," she said, her translator rendering her clicking speech into flat English. "If she dies, you die. Understand?" Jake swallowed hard and nodded. The doors opened. What he saw made his blood freeze. The queen's bed wasn't a bed at all. It was a massive cylindrical chamber of transparent material, filled with glowing fluid and crackling energy fields. And inside, suspended in the liquid, was Queen Vashara herself, her elegant form locked in what looked like a seizure. Monitors around the chamber screamed alerts in colors Jake didn't have names for. A Zytharan engineer huddled in the corner, trembling. "The stasis matrix collapsed," the engineer whispered. "I cannot fix it. No one can. She has 43 minutes before total neural failure." Jake stepped closer, ignoring the guards who tracked his every move with their weapons. He pressed his hand against the chamber's surface and felt the vibration of dying machinery. His mind raced. This wasn't just life support. This was a full medical stasis system, something that required perfect synchronization between a dozen subsystems. If even one failed, the cascade would kill her. He pulled out his diagnostic scanner and started mapping the energy flows. What he found made no sense. The technology was ancient, older than anything he'd studied. The connections were biological and mechanical at the same time. Grown rather than built. No wonder the Zytharan engineer couldn't fix it. This was lost technology, something from before their modern empire. "I need access to the core controls," Jake said. The engineer pointed to a panel with shaking hands. Jake pried it open and stared at a nightmare of crystalline circuits and fluid channels that pulsed like veins. 38 minutes left. He couldn't understand the system, but he could see the failure point. A regulator cluster had overheated and fused. The backup systems were trying to compensate, but they were designed for gradual failures, not catastrophic collapse. He needed to bypass the damaged section entirely, but there was nothing in the Zytharan system to bridge the gap. Then he looked at his own toolkit. Human technology. Crude by Zytharan standards, but reliable, adaptable. He pulled out a portable power coupling and a length of conductive cable. The Zytharan engineer made a sound of horror. "You cannot mix our technology with yours." "It will," Jake cut him off. "It will work, or she dies. Those are the options." He started connecting the human hardware to the alien system, his fingers moving faster than his thoughts. The coupling didn't fit properly, so he melted the casing with a microtorch and jammed it into place. The cable he wound through 3 separate conduits, creating a makeshift bridge that bypassed the fused regulator. 21 minutes. He activated the coupling. The system screamed. Alarms doubled in volume. Then, slowly, the energy flow stabilized. The seizures stopped. The Queen's eyes opened. Jake stepped back, breathing hard, as the chamber's fluid began to drain. The transparent material retracted into the floor, and Queen Vashara rose to her feet, her 4 arms moving with fluid grace despite her ordeal. She was tall, even by Zytharan standards, her skin a deep violet that shimmered with patterns of silver, her eyes, large and multifaceted, fixed on Jake with an intensity that made him want to run. "You," she said, her voice like music played on broken glass, "have done what my own people could not." She stepped out of the chamber, and the guards immediately dropped to one knee. Jake stood frozen, unsure if he should kneel or stay standing. The Queen moved closer, studying him with those alien eyes. "What is your name, human?" Jake Martinez, Your Majesty. Jake Martinez? She repeated it slowly, as if tasting the syllables. You will remain here. I have questions. The captain of the guard stiffened, but said nothing. The other Zytharan engineer fled the room without a word. The Queen touched a control panel, and the door sealed with a hiss that sounded far too final. Your Majesty? Jake started, but she raised one hand. I am not asking, Engineer. I am commanding. You created something in your repair. Something that should not exist. She gestured to the chamber, where his jury-rigged human technology still pulsed with power alongside the alien systems. This hybrid connection you made, it has done more than save my life. Look. She activated a holographic display, and Jake saw streams of data flowing through his makeshift bridge. The human coupling was logging everything, creating a record of every system access, every energy fluctuation, every command input. It was doing what human technology always did, keeping detailed records for troubleshooting. And there, highlighted in the data stream, was an access signature from 2 hours before Jake arrived. Someone had manually overridden the safety protocols. Someone had deliberately sabotaged the Queen's life support. Jake felt his stomach drop. Someone tried to kill you. Yes, Queen Vashara said softly, and they very nearly succeeded. I have been poisoned, Engineer, slowly over months, with a toxin that degrades my natural healing. The stasis chamber was the only thing keeping me alive while my physicians searched for a cure. When it failed tonight, I thought it was my time. Her eyes narrowed. But it was not failure. It was murder. She manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on the access signature. Jake saw a complex identifier that meant nothing to him, but the Queen's expression darkened. This code belongs to someone in my inner court, someone I trusted. She looked at Jake again. Your human technology has given me proof. But proof means nothing if I am dead, and the conspirators will know by now that I survived. They will act quickly. As if summoned by her words, an explosion rocked the palace. The lights flickered. Alarms began to wail throughout the complex. The Queen moved to a communication panel and pressed her hand against it. Nothing happened. She tried again. Still nothing. Communications are severed, she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. We are being jammed. Jake heard the sound of energy weapons firing somewhere in the palace, the sharp crack of plasma rifles and the deeper boom of heavy cannons. The Queen's chamber had thick walls, but he could feel the vibrations of combat through the floor. This is a coup, the Queen said, confirming what Jake had already guessed. The conspirators are making their move. They will try to kill me and blame it on human sabotage. Then they will have their war. War? Jake's voice cracked. With Earth? Yes, there are those in my court who believe your species is inferior, weak. They want to conquer your worlds and take your resources before you become a threat. Queen Vashara moved back to the stasis chamber and touched a hidden panel. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a cache of weapons. She pulled out a plasma rifle and checked its charge. They have underestimated humans before. They are about to do so again. The doors to the chamber shuddered as something massive struck them from outside. Jake could hear shouting in the Zytharan language, commands and responses that his translator couldn't quite catch. The Queen handed him a smaller weapon, a pistol-sized plasma gun that felt too light in his hand. Can you shoot? She asked. I'm an engineer, not a soldier. Then you will learn quickly. She took up a position beside the door, her rifle aimed and ready. My loyal guards are fighting out there, but they are outnumbered. The conspirators have been planning this for months. They have allies throughout the palace guard. Another impact on the doors. This time, Jake saw the metal begin to glow red at the edges. They were cutting through. He looked around the chamber desperately, his engineer's mind racing. The stasis system. His hybrid repair. The human technology that was still connected to the Zytharan power grid. An idea formed, crazy and desperate. Your Majesty, he said quickly. That stasis chamber. How much power does it draw? She glanced at him, confused. At full capacity? Enough to run a small city. Why? Because I might have a way to stop them. But it's going to be dangerous. He moved to the chamber's control panel, his fingers already flying over the interface. The human coupling I installed. It's connected to your palace power grid through the Zytharan systems. If I overload it, I can create a feedback pulse, an electromagnetic surge strong enough to disable every weapon and electronic system in this wing of the palace. The Queen understood immediately, including my life support. Yes, and including my heart if I'm too close to the discharge point. Jake pulled up schematics on the holographic display, calculating power flows and discharge patterns in his head, but their weapons will be dead. Your loyal guards will have a chance to retake this section, and if we do it right, the pulse will be directional. Mostly, the Queen repeated. The doors were glowing bright orange now. 30 seconds, maybe less. She looked at Jake, and he saw something in those alien eyes that he recognized. Trust, desperation. The same look he'd seen in human eyes 100 times when he was the only person who could fix the unfixable. Do it, she said. Jake's hands moved faster than they ever had. He rerouted power conduits, disabled safeties, and linked the human coupling directly to the chamber's main energy core. The system began to whine, a rising pitch that made his teeth ache. He set a timer for 15 seconds and grabbed the Queen's arm. Get in the chamber, now. She didn't argue. She dropped the rifle and stepped into the cylinder as the remaining fluid began to fill it again. Jake sealed the chamber and activated the emergency medical protocols. The Queen's body went rigid as the stasis field engaged. He could see her heart rate on the monitors, slowing, almost stopping. The chamber would protect her from the worst of the EMP, but barely. The doors exploded inward. Zytharan soldiers in black armor poured through, their weapons raised. Jake saw at least a dozen of them, their rifles already tracking toward him. He dove behind the control panel as plasma bolts seared the air where he'd been standing. 5 seconds. The lead soldier shouted something, probably a demand for surrender. Jake stayed down, his hand on the activation trigger for the overload. He could smell ozone and burned metal. Another plasma bolt struck the panel above his head, showering him with sparks. 3 seconds. Through the gap in the panel, he saw one of the soldiers approaching the stasis chamber, weapon aimed at the Queen's suspended form. No, not after everything. Not when they were this close. 1 second. Jake triggered the overload. The human coupling exploded with a sound like thunder trapped in a bottle. Lightning arced through every connection, through every conduit, through the entire hybrid system he'd created. The electromagnetic pulse hit like a physical wave, and Jake felt his muscles lock up as electricity coursed through his body. Every light in the chamber went dark. Every weapon powered down. Every piece of Zytharan technology died in an instant. Then, the silence, broken only by the sound of armored bodies hitting the floor as their suits' power systems failed. Jake couldn't move. His heart felt wrong, stuttering and irregular. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't respond. Through fading vision, he saw the stasis chamber. Dark. Completely dark. The fluid had stopped circulating. The Queen was trapped inside with no power, no life support. He'd killed her. No, that couldn't be the end. Not like this. Jake forced his hand to move, crawling toward the chamber even as his body screamed in protest. His toolkit. Where was his toolkit? There. He dragged it closer, dumped out the contents with numb fingers. Manual tools, non-electronic. He found a pry bar and jammed it into the chamber's seal. The transparent material had locked when the power died, trapping the Queen inside. He pulled with everything he had. The seal cracked. Fluid poured out across the floor. Jake reached in and grabbed the Queen's arm, hauling her body out of the chamber. She was cold, not breathing. Her multifaceted eyes were open but unseeing. He pressed his ear to her chest. No heartbeat. Zytharan biology was different from human, but the basics were the same. Circulation, respiration, brain activity. All stopped. CPR. He'd learned it years ago, basic first aid certification that every engineer was required to have. But this was an alien. Different skeletal structure. Different organs. He didn't even know if chest compressions would work, but he had to try. He positioned his hands on the Queen's thorax, found what he hoped was the right spot, and started compressions. 30 count. Then he tilted her head back, sealed his mouth over hers, and forced air into her lungs. Her physiology was strange, but her lungs inflated. That was something. Again. Compressions. Breathing. Compressions. Breathing. His own heart was still struggling, his vision still fading in and out, but he kept going. He had no idea how long Zytharans could survive without oxygen. He had no idea if this would even work. But he couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Jake nearly screamed, thinking the soldiers had recovered. But it was a Zytharan in different armor, gold trim instead of black, the Queen's colors, the captain of the guard, her face bloodied but her eyes fierce. "Human," she gasped. "What are you?" "CPR," Jake panted between compressions. Human technique for when the heart stops. "Help me." She dropped to her knees and followed Jake's rhythm, her stronger arms taking over the compressions while Jake handled the breathing. More guards poured into the chamber, these ones in gold armor. The loyal forces had broken through. They secured the room, disarming the incapacitated conspirators. But all eyes turned to their queen's motionless body. Jake lost count of the cycles. His lungs burned. His arms shook. The captain showed no signs of stopping. Her face set in grim determination. Then, finally, the queen's body convulsed. She coughed, fluid spraying from her mouth. Her eyes focused. Her chest rose and fell on its own. She was breathing. The chamber erupted in sounds Jake didn't understand. What he guessed were Zytharan cheers or prayers. The captain stepped back, letting the queen sit up slowly. Queen Vishara looked around at the devastated chamber, at the unconscious conspirators in black armor, at the captain of the guard with her bloodied face, and finally at Jake, who was still kneeling beside her, his hands shaking. "You stopped my heart," she said, her voice raw. "The EMP did that," Jake managed. "I just restarted it. With a human technique, something we do not know." She reached out and touched his face with one hand, a gesture that seemed intimate, even across species. "You have saved my life twice in one night, Jake Martinez, and you have revealed traitors who would have destroyed both our peoples." Over the next hour, as power was slowly restored to the palace and the full scope of the coup attempt became clear, Jake learned just how close they'd come to disaster. 37 members of the Queen's court had been part of the conspiracy, including 3 high admirals and the head of the military council. They'd planned to kill the Queen, blame human sabotage, and use the outrage to launch a preemptive strike against Earth's colonies. The war would have been catastrophic. But Jake's hybrid repair system had logged everything. Every conspirator who'd accessed the Queen's chamber. Every override command. Every sabotaged safety protocol. The evidence was irrefutable. By dawn, all 37 were in custody, and the Queen's loyal forces had secured the palace and the surrounding military installations. Jake sat in a chair in the Queen's council chamber, a blanket around his shoulders and a cup of something warm and sweet in his hands. The Zytharan physicians had checked him over and declared him miraculously unharmed despite the electrical surge. His heart had returned to normal rhythm. The burns on his hands were superficial. He should have died half a dozen times tonight, but somehow he hadn't. Queen Vishara entered the chamber, moving slowly but under her own power. She'd refused to return to her stasis bed until her physicians could completely rebuild it with new safeguards. For now, she was managing on medication and sheer willpower. She sat across from Jake, and for a moment they just looked at each other. "My advisors tell me I should reward you," she said finally. "Titles, land, wealth, whatever you desire." "I just want to go home," Jake said honestly. "Back to my apartment. Back to normal repair calls that don't involve assassination attempts and coups." The Queen's expression, alien as it was, somehow conveyed sadness. "I cannot give you that. Not anymore. What happened tonight will change everything, Jake Martinez. The conspirators wanted war because they believed humans were inferior, weak, incapable of matching Zytharan power." She gestured around the chamber. "You have proven them catastrophically wrong. You understood our technology better than our own engineers. You saved a life that our own physicians had declared unsavable. You adapted, improvised, and survived against impossible odds. She stood and walked to a window overlooking the palace grounds. The sun was rising, casting golden light across the crystalline architecture. The Empire was built on the belief that Zytharans are supreme, that all other species exist to serve us or be conquered. But you have shown me a different path. Human ingenuity, human compassion, human refusal to accept the impossible. She turned back to him. I am going to change the laws. All of them. Humans will no longer be second-class subjects in my empire. You will be partners, equals. Jake felt something huge shifting, like tectonic plates grinding against each other deep underground. Your Majesty, that's going to cause problems. Massive problems. There are a lot of Zytharans who think like those conspirators did. Yes, she agreed. And they will resist. Some may even rebel. But I have seen the alternative, and it ends in a war that destroys both our species. I choose this path instead. She moved closer to him again. And you, Jake Martinez, will help me. I am creating a new position, Imperial Engineer, the first human to hold a rank in my government. You will oversee the integration of human and Zytharan technology. You will train our engineers in your methods. You will be proof that cooperation is stronger than conquest. I am not a politician, Jake protested. I fix things. Yes, Queen Vashara said, and something like a smile crossed her alien features. You fix things, so fix this. Fix the Empire. Fix the hatred and the fear. Show my people what you showed me tonight. Jake thought about refusing. He thought about his small apartment, his quiet life, his simple repair jobs. Then he thought about the war that would have come. Millions dead on both sides. Earth's colonies burned. The Zytharan fleets destroyed, all because of fear and pride. He'd come to fix a bed. Instead, he'd fix something much more important. All right, he said. I'll do it. The news spread across both empires within days. The attempted coup. The human engineer who saved the queen. The revolutionary new laws that granted humans full citizenship and rights within the Zytharan Empire. There was outrage, as Queen Vashara had predicted. There were protests and threats and calls for her abdication, but there was also hope, especially among the younger Zytharans, who had never understood the old supremacist ways. Jake stood beside the Queen when she announced the changes to the Imperial Senate, and he felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes on him. But he also felt something else. The Queen's hand on his shoulder, a gesture of trust and partnership that transcended species. The captain of the guard, standing at attention behind them, who had helped him restart the Queen's heart. The engineers, both human and Zytharan, who were already collaborating on new hybrid technologies, inspired by his emergency repair. One impossible night had changed everything. One human, armed with nothing but tools and determination, had altered the course of history. He'd come to fix a bed. But what happened next changed an entire empire, and the universe would never be the same.